So Mary and Daisy, welcome to the On Her Mark podcast. I'm so happy to have both of you guys here. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
This, I have to say, is very fun because it's the first time that we have had a mother-daughter duo on the podcast. And both of you have accomplished so much. We have so much to talk about. And I want to start, Daisy, first of all, congratulations. I mean, you are right now, I mean, I want to say we're getting close to the games, but there's still so much time, but you are officially going to Paris. What does that feel like?
It's honestly, it's a crazy sensation. I don't know though if it ever feels real. I mean, I assume when I get to Paris it'll feel real, but right now I feel like yeah, I don't know how it feels. It is crazy. Yeah.
You're in training, like practice now, like straight through, right? So what does a day look like for you right now?
My day today, woke up, went to practice, had a row. Then we had to do headshots for US rowing or the US OPC, something like that. And then I took a nap, I ate some lunch, I'm doing this call, and then this afternoon I have a lift and then some more like cardio minutes. So it's a pretty full day if you count the nap.
I would say if you count the nap. I love Mary, your reaction. You're like, yep.
The nap 100% counts when you're in training.
The nap is crucial, right? Like that is probably the thing that keeps you going, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Mary, what is it like to see Daisy living this now? I mean, you competed in the Olympics in 1992. You've had a similar experience, and then to see your daughter thriving in the same way.
Well, it's amazing. And honestly, like Daisy, as part of Team USA, she was on the senior team, the women's team last summer, where she helped the team win a silver medal. And so she is the highest rated, highest decorated athlete in the family. My husband was also a rower. And, you know, to see Daisy do this, like I was a good athlete. I wouldn't say I was a great athlete. And I say that like with all realism. And so to be able to vicariously live through my daughter a second time around, but she's so much more talented and she's stronger and fitter and tougher in so many ways. It's so exciting because I get to live it again. And instead of being a B finalist, you know, I'm now an A finalist through my child. So there's something, you know, very, very exciting about that. But mostly, you know, in all candor, to see Daisy pursue a goal and seeing how hard she's worked for it, seeing how she brings people together in a really understated but such a strong leader on the team, even at such a young age. I could not be more proud of Daisy and the person that she's becoming and the woman that she's growing into. It's I adore her.
This is so cool. I was gonna say, I'm like locked in on Mary during this because I'm like, this is so great. And then I'm like, but Daisy's right here too. This like what a cool moment. And Daisy, you've had like your mom's such a badass. Like she, you know, in the introduction, I'll name some of it, but she's an incredible athlete. She's done so much for the sports community. She's done so much for women in sports. She's done so much, right? She's a filmmaker. She's, what do you call yourself? A recovering lawyer? Like she's done so much. What have you learned from her, Daisy, throughout the years that you think has helped you get to where you are?
I feel like I've learned so much from my mom, honestly. I feel like she just sets an incredibly high bar for herself and holds herself to such a high standard. And I think there's a lot of people who would accomplish one of the things that she has accomplished and call it a day. And I think what's so inspirational is that like she'll accomplish an amazing feat and then just move on to the next thing. And I think that, yeah, that like dedication to whatever cause is in front of her is really, yeah, really inspirational. And I think like that is changing the way that or helping form the way that I shape my life. So
I agree 100%. What you've done, Mary, is just like phenomenal. Like you just take everything and you put it appears, right? Put everything into it. And I want to talk, I told you we have so many places to go, but first let's talk about how you found sport, because I think sport, as both of you have kind of alluded to, has done so much for your lives, right? Has given you so much. So Mary, when did you first find sport? Was rowing the first sport that you found?
Oh, no, 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 no. I had no eye-hand coordination in high school. I was literally cut from almost every team. And, I'd be out there, I'd be like, squeezing my eyes shut. And I played JV softball where I could barely catch the ball. And I was on the varsity track team where I didn't run. I threw the javelin, and quite poorly, I might add. And I was a cheerleader at Needham High. And but I'd watch the Olympic Games and I'd like dream, and was so far away from that reality. And I think what I didn't realize was didn't have the motor skills. I didn't have eye-hand coordination. And so I go to a women's college, Mount Holyoke, and I'm walking around, and I had done dance. So I was pretty strong, but not fit. And someone comes up to me, a man, and he says, so you have some pretty big legs. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm about to drop the F-bomb. And he's like, I'm the new rowing coach here at Mount Holyoke. Like, would you show up? Would you like to come down and try out? You're fairly tall. And I'm like, oh, this is my chance to be an athlete. Well, I show up and they make you run. And for some reason, 200 women also showed up. And they make you run, a mile and a half around Upper Lake. I am, if not DFL, I'm like second to DFL. I'm like squeezing my side. And I remember him coming up and saying, Mary, I don't think we have so many people here. I don't think we're going to need you. And I literally in that moment don't know what I said. But it was a lesson my mother said to me. And I hope that I've shared this with Daisy, which is, no, you never take no for an answer. And I don't know what I said to him, but he was like, okay, you can come down another day. And by the end of that first week, the sport of rowing, you're getting up at 5 a.m. and you're running 3 miles in the dark to the boathouse. And by the end of the first week, almost everybody had quit. So I became an athlete literally by default. And that's how I stumbled into a sport that I didn't need eye hand, but it was about dedication and strength. And for sure, you need some sort of genetic talent. But it was all about work ethic and the grind. And that's how it started for me. And it was really this joyous experience with other women in a boat where you're in unison and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And there was something really exciting about that experience for me. And the reason, actually, if I can digress, the reason I went on after college to pursue the elite level is because we were so bad at Mount Holyoke. I don't think I won a single medal. And I was like, I am not going to close out my career without a medal of some kind. Didn't care if it was made of wood, and so thus began a journey into the elite level of rowing that I, again, thinking of my mother, it's really about how you handle, like when somebody says no is just for that moment. Maybe it lasts 5 minutes, maybe it lasts 5 years, but it can become yes. And how do you think about that?
That's so cool. I love that, like the competitive nature in you. I was like, I'm not going out on this note. Like there's so much good here, but I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. And I feel like, Daisy, from reading a little bit about your story, it was a little similar in that you found rowing later. Or you picked it up later, right? Didn't you start and then you were like, Mom, I'm not doing this?
Oh yeah, that was, I'll let Daisy speak, but it was an epic fail on my part.
Yeah,
But it worked out. It worked out. It was no for now. And then it came back full circle later.
that's true. Yeah. It
So,
was a hard no for a few years. It was hard.
Daisy, why was it a hard no?
Because I don't even remember how old I was. How old do you think I was?
I think you were like 11.
I was like a child.
Okay, 8.
And we went for a row, me and my mom in a double. I don't even remember the time of day, but I know I got so dehydrated and we finish this row and we get off the water and I was like lightheaded and I didn't was so confused and then I vomit everywhere. It was a horrible experience. And then later my mom offered to take me rowing again and I was like, absolutely not. That was the worst thing that's ever happened.
I'm so at fault for that because Daisy had said I'm getting thirsty and I'm like, yeah, you'll be fine.
I was not
tough
fine.
love, a little too young for the tough love.
Yeah.
That's so funny. And then, but then you found it in high school and you then pursued it at Yale and then Texas, and then you weren't done yet. And that was, did you know that when you started rowing at Yale that you were going to try to pursue it post college?
On it, I feel like it's hard to say, but I feel like I think I was just like raised around a lot of elite athletes that like when I think of like this standard that I wanted to compete at, it was a very high standard. So I think even when I was at college, I was like, oh, I just want to be better than how I was. So I think, yeah, I don't know if I would have said like my freshman year that I wanted to row after college, but honestly, maybe I would have said that. I feel like for a while I knew that, yeah, I just wanted to push myself, I think, within sport.
What a line of strong women you guys have in your family. That is incredible. That is incredible. Okay, so we mentioned there Yale, and the Yale women's rowing program has a huge legacy. And that is a legacy from 1976, where they protested for equal treatment, right? Under Title IX, under the protections of Title IX. And this is something, Mary, that you like attached to when you learned about it. And then you created this incredible documentary, A Hero for Daisy. Now it all makes sense. What's it a name? But what was it about that story that you wanted to share with people?
Honestly, I was a very young filmmaker. I was actually a young lawyer at the time. And I had gone to a women's college, as I mentioned before, and I looked around the media landscape and I was like, all right, I don't know any woman that I'm seeing reflected in television and ads. Like, where are the strong women? Where are the funny women? Where are the big thighed women? Where are the women of color? Where are the women, right? And so when I'd be at Olympic camp, when you're supposed to be napping, and Daisy, rightly so, said never underestimate the value of a good nap, I'd be writing. And so I had these screenplays ultimately that were bouncing around Hollywood and having meetings, and never thought I would make a documentary. But when I did, it was initially going to be an exercise for film school. I was going to BU film school completely on the sly. Nobody at my law firm knew I was going.
Oh, wow.
And my dear friend Chris Ernst had been a two-time Olympian. She was captain of the women's team at Yale, and of course she was there in 1976. And with some others, and some other people, was like she was really the ringleader, if you will, of this revolt at Yale, where the women didn't have athletic facilities. They would row in the wind and the rain and wait on an unheated bus for a half an hour while the men would shower and come out pink and steamy. And they were like, okay, what's wrong with this picture? We're paying tuition just like the boys, and why are we getting sick? And many of us are going on to the Olympic Games. And so I had heard about that story, and it was at the time sort of so much about what I cared about. It was, how are women reflected? What are impediments to success? And here's this great story about fighting back, and a David and Goliath story in many ways. And I thought, what a story. And went and made A Hero for Daisy. It was my very first film. And I'll never forget, we had like a dripping wet 16mm print at the West Newton Cinema. And it was the head of the Charles. And an amazing sports writer for the Globe wrote about A Hero for Daisy. She put it above the Patriots in October. Think about this, above the crease. And the West Newton was like, we got to keep running this. Like, and all of a sudden, the New York Times picked it up, and it's going around the country. And what was happening when the film came out is athletic directors were confronted with, how do we balance opportunities for women? And I can't claim that the film resulted in sort of the explosion of rowing, but it certainly helped, because athletic directors and big schools started screening A Hero for Daisy And all of a sudden you see this explosion of the sport. How do we equalize the numbers of football players and basketball players and male athletes? Well, wait a minute, rowing's, we just saw this movie and it's a way to field a large, give opportunity to a large number of women. So in many ways, the sport has been the beneficiary of Title IX. And now you see athletes like Daisy. I mean, there are 100 D1 rowing programs, many of them scholarship in this country. And so the caliber and quality of athletes has just leaps and bounds from when I was rowing, right? And that's also really exciting to see the talent pool start to open up in ways that are really extraordinary. And then we just did a film a couple of years ago, Most Beautiful Thing, again, back to our rowing roots. And that was, of course, around the sport as it relates to diversity. And it chronicled the first African-American boys rowing team on the west side of Chicago. And so we're seeing young people of color that are now coming into the sport. It's so good for the sport, for the lessons that you learn, but also increases our talent pool dramatically outside of the Ivy League white men and like largely white population. And now you're seeing just a sort of a great swelling of young students of all color coming into the sport and making it better for all of us.
And I love that you've done these documentaries, because I think what's so important is if you can see it, you can be it. And I know it sounds so cliche, but in a lot of ways, when we don't see something and where the stories aren't being told, people don't know it's a possibility. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they're missing, right? And so to give it a platform like you are, Mary, is so incredible, to give these next generations an opportunity to just know about it and then make their own decision if it's for them and if it's something they want to pursue. So I'm curious, Daisy, of like growing up in these next generations, exactly why your mom made these films, right? Of who did you look up to in sport, and what opportunities were you witnessing that you were excited to go after?
I feel like I looked up to a lot of like the local female rowers, that because I was raised in Boston and there's a pretty big rowing community in Boston. And as I was growing up, the women's single sculler, Jevy Stone, she was training in Boston.
Yeah.
And she was just like this larger than life figure who I think was so inspirational because she really was just like similar to my mom, undeniably determined. She got cut from a camp and just like persevered through it all and figured out her own training plan, pretty much like figured everything out on her own, essentially set up a whole training center in Boston and was able to like really excel. And I think, yeah, it was so inspirational for me as a young rower to see that and see the possibilities. And I think it's like inspirational to just see that like you can, I think because rowing is like such a team sport, I think it's hard if you get cut from a team or if you think that like you won't make it. But I think to see an athlete like Jevy who just like overcame all those adversities is it's so inspirational, because you're just like, even if I get knocked down here or there, like I can still keep going and I can still excel.
You mentioned like being surrounded by such incredible athletes your whole life. Maybe like what's that community like for you that you grew up surrounded by and you continue to build now?
I feel like I think I was just surrounded by a community that did not accept excuses. And I think as an athlete, that's like such a valuable lesson to learn, where like a lot of my mom's friends are elite athletes. And I think you can see people of like all different builds, like come from different backgrounds, and everybody kind of had to overcome something to like achieve whatever they had achieved. And I think, yeah, it's valuable to just see a group of people who like clearly had to work very hard, but all managed to do it. And I think, yeah, when you're surrounded by a group of people like that, it's just easier to be like, oh, why can't I do it then if I see all these people who have done it? So
100%. And Mary, you helped build this community, clearly, your friends, and it's something, I mean, we can talk about the head of the Charles here, because I think that's something, that regatta is still something, Mary, that you're on the water, you're out there. What is it about this community that brings you back to the sport and keeps you in the sport for as long as it has?
You know, it's a place where you're outside, you're on the Charles River, it's beautiful. You see the sun rising in the early morning and you hear the birds. But ultimately, so I still row with my Olympic doubles partner back from 92. And
That's incredible. Like, that alone is just so cool.
it's really, when we race the head of the Charles, it's really a trip down memory lane, because we're so much slower. We're not impressive anymore, but we've both gone through sort of life, you know, these life challenges and stages, and to shove off the dock and know that you're rowing with somebody that you've been rowing with for almost 30 years now, right? Since the games, is, you know, you leave your backpack of worries on the dock and you shove off, and it's like you're, you know, 22 again. And for us, it's just been a beautiful experience to be able to do that. And we still do that. You know, we race every head of the Charles, and we'll sometimes race in the UK, you know, at Masters, Henley Masters, and we still, you know, do anaerobic threshold work on Saturdays and speed work on Tuesdays. And, you know, it certainly ain't pretty. But for us to be, it's a sense of connectivity, of connection, of sort of this communing with the water in many ways. That's just, it's just really beautiful and meaningful in so many ways, because we're really celebrating the passage of time, and yet it stands still when we get in the boat together.
I love hearing that, because I think that's one of the most important things with sport, and is that it can be for life, and these connections and the reason that you're drawn to it, that piece when you're on the water and like letting everything go, is what keeps you coming back, right? Like, that is what sport is all about. So I want to talk about the moment that women's sports is having. Obviously, this podcast is celebrating women in sports and those blazing trails, which both of you are doing. And women's sports are kind of on this platform right now where they're getting the attention that they need. Still a long way to go. It's like Title IX, right? Like, you get there and there's still a lot more to be done. But what do you guys think as mother-daughter, as a family, but also as such advocates in this space, can be done to continue to grow women's sports on the broader level, on the national, international stage, but also in homes?
I think that fundamentally it all comes down to that, like, female athletes' stories need to be told. I think if you look at the NCAA right now and you look at like the comparison between men's basketball and women's basketball, I think women's basketball is exploding, not just because the talent level of the athletes there, but because these women are in their schools for 4 years and they like build a narrative at their school and in the news. And I think everybody gets inspired by narratives of athletes. And it's, as soon as women like have the opportunity to like put those narratives in the press, I think people will go. And the men, especially like with college basketball, don't have the same opportunity because the top athletes just go pro. That it's like, I think it like so clearly shows that it's the stories of these athletes that really are what impact people, as opposed to just their performance.
I couldn't agree more. Very well said. Very well said. And at home, I think there's like, Mary, you've obviously done such an incredible job of encouraging Daisy throughout her life, and also giving her examples of greatness. What is the most important thing at home people can do?
Maybe. I'm sure Daisy gets exhausted from my like tireless suggestions and coaching.
Does that come, Daisy? Is that welcome? Are those pointers welcome?
Yeah, I think my mom has a lot of good advice to offer.
Oh,
Yeah.
She's gonna text you after and be like, I take that back. That was for the public. I'm only kidding. So what do you think that parents and people can do as they're raising these next generations with both daughters and sons to help this boom in women's sports continue to get to where we deserve to be?
Well, I think, acutely for women, that having a place where you can test your boundaries, where you can get dirty, get sweaty, is really important. And there are so many studies around substance abuse and pregnancy rates and all of those things, and all of those challenges are simply made better, right? And there are fewer incidents when your daughter, especially, has an opportunity to be athletes. And we're in a time, and a bit of a dangerous time, where you have parents running youth leagues. You have sort of this industrialization of youth sport in a way where kids don't get to flex their leadership or creativity. And I think we have to be on guard because so many, both boys and girls, are quitting. When I think girls, there's a huge percentage that quit by the time they're 13. And same thing for boys, right? Because you've got parents that have co-opted the game in many ways. And I'm sure I'm one of them, a helicopter mom, or hey, how did the game go? And last thing the kid wants to, like, get an ice cream, let me sulk if I lost, or
Yeah.
but I think that is something we really have to be on guard for. And I think, there are so many studies about what exercise does for the young human mind, soul, and body. And yet you're seeing programs cut, right, in schools. And so I think we really have to be on guard. I'm of course, I proselytize for the sport of rowing. I had a psychologist reach out after we did A Most Beautiful Thing, and she said, there is no better sport for trauma healing, right? Because it's rhythmic, it's on the water, there's a sense of peace, and you are not combative with others on your team. Yeah, you're combative against a team, but you have to be in unison with the person in front and behind you. And she said every young child, whether it's that, perhaps long distance running, where there's a sort of a pace and a rhythm. I thought that was such an interesting perspective, that this is a sport uniquely suited in many ways to young children healing, young people healing. And after COVID, so many young people are suffering from increased rates of anxiety and depression, that to be out there on the water, whether it's rowing or canoeing or running, or cross-country skiing or sports like that, I think are so crucially important.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that you say that, because I think there's this misconception. If you're not going pro, if you're not going to college for it, what's the point? And that's not the point. The point isn't, that is a bonus. That is great if that is what it comes to, but there is so much more value in sport than just the outcome, right? So I'm loving this. We are running out of time, but I ask everyone this question. Do you guys have a mantra on days that are hard? Maybe it's life is hard. Maybe it's a workout's hard. Anything that helps get you through.
I feel like I have a bunch of mantras. I like repeat it to me. But one that really stuck with me is one that my college coach used to say all the time. And he used to say, be at your best when your best is needed. And I feel like it just is, I think now that I'm speaking about it, that is like kind of a high pressure mantra. But I think it just like gives you space, but also like really holds you accountable. That I think that was a mantra that I really leaned on, like during high pressure selection and high pressure racing.
I feel like that's when an elite athlete, like, get inside their brain, because when you're called on, that's when you thrive in a lot of times.
And Daisy has this unique ability that when it gets really hard, that's when she just puts the pedal to the metal. And Daisy's been in a lot of boats where you see them kind of coming, a furious sprint where maybe they're down, and then, boats that Daisies are in, you start to see rocket ahead. And at first I was like, oh, that's interesting. Wait a minute, that happened again. Okay, this is an interesting pattern where, she has just an amazing ability to go into that pain cave and say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be at my best when my best is needed. I think I have a very different mantra.
See, it takes all kinds of kinds, Mary. It takes all kinds of kinds.
And, I feel like I have failed so many times in my life. And my mantra really is when you're having a hard day, when you're failing, to not make an excuse. Because I used to make excuses. We're in a society that, oh, the ref called that, or right. We all make excuses. And when you do that, you cannot improve. And so it was Chris Ernst, who was featured in my very first film, who said to me, why do you make excuses? And if you do, you're limiting your own possibilities. And so when you can analyze a failure and analyze a loss, okay, what could I have done better? What should I have done better? That's when you can, explode back upwards, because it's painful to lose. It's painful to fail. But I think it's really important. And we live in a society that doesn't really tolerate very much failure. And I think it's crucially important to truly succeed.
I think that's so important. I love that you just said that. I think a thing about sports is that failure, you need to fail to appreciate the wins, right? Like you need to lose to appreciate the wins. You need to lose to learn how to win in a lot of ways. So that's amazing. Well, I have loved this. I feel like we have so much more to talk about, but I want to, quickly, most things that you're most looking forward to about Paris this summer. Daisy, I can start with you.
I'm excited for all of it. I think it's going to be, I feel like rowing is often a quiet sport apart from like a few races, like maybe NCAA finals, Head of the Charles definitely, and Henley Royal Regatta. But it's pretty cool to have the opportunity to race in a venue where rowing will be like like there'll be crowds. Like I think I'm just excited for like the energy that comes with all of that.
Absolutely. And Mary, will you be going to Paris?
Oh, are you kidding me? Absolutely. And it's going to be so annoying to Daisy because I'm going to be screaming and, and I can't call her by her childhood nicknames because then she doesn't appear to be as intimidating as she really is. But it's just wonderful. And could not be prouder. All her entire family and extended family are so proud of her. And we're also excited for the culinary and, tour that we're also planning because, it's France and, it's France to eat well. And so we're just looking forward to all aspects of it and could not be prouder.
That's amazing. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to chat today. I'm so grateful for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.